Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Unwelcome Podcast. Hey, I'm jumping on a little bit early. I'm supposed to have BillBoard Chris here at 1 p.m. And I'm waiting to hear back and make sure that we got all that done. But right now, I wanted to bring in, got Megan Fox coming in. Hello, Megan. How are you?
Hey, Mark. Good. How are you?
I'm good. Hold on. Let me fix of course, my sound went wonky. But so you have been fighting the good fight this morning. Let me fix my headphones. Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties.
It just happens.
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
my own problems
Well,
today
yeah.
as well.
Well, hey, why don't you just explain to us why I fixed this? I might just have to go headphoneless for a minute.
Sure.
What you were doing this morning, and I know that you had an interview with Warren Hamilton this morning.
I
Um,
did.
Go ahead and explain that. I'm just going to step over here real quick and.
Sure. Senator Hamilton came on the program today and he talked to me about the fact that there have now been 3 bills that have been put forward by different representatives to stop the gender transitioning of young people, of children in Oklahoma, and all 3 of them have been stopped by Republican leadership. And wow, that is just, to me, that's just insane in a state like Oklahoma that is so conservative. And I think Representative or Senator Hamilton is certainly on the record saying he's not going to vote for this. He's not going to vote for this funding bill for OU Hospital unless they can put a statewide ban on. But Mark, I found out some disturbing things today about what's happening in the courts. I don't know if you're aware of this. I did not know it. But I know you were mentioning Arkansas the other day, but I can't remember if we were talking about the court case. But Arkansas did pass a ban on transgender transition for children,
Okay.
and a 3-panel circuit court, the Eighth Circuit Court, um, basically overturned the law and called it a violation of sex rights based on sex discrimination, which is, I can't even wrap my head around it. I don't have the ruling in front of me. I just have the explanation that was written about in the press. And I'm telling you what, this is going to be used as precedent now for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. It is so unbelievably, I can't wrap my head around it, that you can somehow say that it's sex discrimination to ban minors from having elective surgeries and elective experimental hormone therapy. For one, what about tattoos? Like
Yeah.
tattoo, I mean, you can't have a tattoo if you're 18. All the bill did in Arkansas was put an age limit on this stuff. So
Right.
once you hit the age of majority, you can do whatever you want.
Well, but I think the criminality end of it may be the issue, huh? Because the bill in Arkansas made it a felony. So I'm wondering if that's
That they didn't mention that, at least not in the article that I read. In fact, here I'll tell you. It actually was based on a federal appeals court based they're overturning the Arkansas law based on, this is what they said. Because this is so hard to understand. I had to read it 3 times, and I was like,
well,
"What? I still don't get it."
I'm wondering if it has something to do with Gorsuch's ruling on sex and gender that came out, I think, a little while ago, before this. But go ahead, go ahead.
Well, I'm looking for what they said it was based on because it was so confusing to me. I need a lawyer to look at this and tell me how this makes any sense. Basically saying that because the surgeries and the therapies are based on what sex you were born, so
Mhm.
males can get the surgery for the, transitioning to females, so it's one hormone therapy and the females get a different hormone therapy, that it's discriminatory based on sex to keep them from doing it. It makes no sense, Mark. None. Zero.
Uh,
And I'm going to ask Nick Rekieta. I've sent him an email. I'm hoping that he will get the filing and go through it with me because I don't. Uh, this is nuts. I've
yeah,
never, and this is disturbing. And people need to look at this as far like lawyers need to start looking at this. The ACLU, by the way, brought the lawsuit. It was
no
the
way.
yeah. The ACLU is the most corrupt organization in America right now. They're on a mission to silence and stop all conservative laws, values, everything. Anything we do, the ACLU is on top of it with lawsuits, subverting the will of the people. So the people of a state vote for something. And whatever it is, if it's conservative, the ACLU sues. That goes for putting boys in girls' bathrooms and violating the privacy of women and girls, putting boys on girls' sports team and destroying
Right.
sports for girls. They have been at the forefront of all of this.
Well, and they're abusing civil rights law, and Title IX, specifically in the schools and things in the exact same way. This is a systemic problem that is I mean, it's far reaching, and it's also, it dips into affirmative action, believe it or not, and all of that. So there's a big mess to untangle, and I don't think people understand that this is a part of the long march through the institutions.
God, it's
And
terrible.
but I do want to.
I
I would.
found it. I found it. You
Okay.
wanna see what it says? Here, I'm sharing it
Yeah.
with you if you wanna pull up the article. It's in the Guardian. It says, "Because the minor's sex at birth determines whether or not the minor can receive certain types of medical care under the law, Act 626 discriminates on the basis of sex." I
But I thought sex and gender were different.
Subjective? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
no,
It
I
all
thought
like,
that they
I
were
thought there's
different.
really no such thing.
Right,
Like
right. See, it doesn't make any sense,
mm-mm.
and this is critical theory in the law. That's what this is. It's flipping terms. It's swapping one route for the other, and which gets me to my point when it comes to the Oklahoma situation. So I've been doing some digging and talking to some people. There's a big conflation happening here that I think that is working in the benefit of those who want to pass this money. Um, they are conflating, okay, the procedures with the infrastructure that's going to allow them in the future. Okay, this money in totality, and if you go line item by line item, which I have on early episodes, okay, it is going towards infrastructure spending. So these beds, like when I spoke with Representative West yesterday, he
Yeah.
was talking about this money is going to these beds. Well, the beds, and the only enforcement mechanism is to remove the money that's going for these beds if they do the procedures between now and the time that the beds are built. And when I say
Mhm.
beds, I mean the whole apparatus that will house them, the new wing, whatever they're going to build, right?
Mhm.
So essentially what's happening is they're building the model, or they're building the housing unit that's going to house this apparatus in the future, and kicking the can down the road, saying, well, we're going to stop the procedures now, but 2 years from now, when the beds get built, especially say we have a Democratic governor, like I brought up
Exactly.
um, with Representative West. So them kicking this can down the road with this little stopgap bill that doesn't make any sense, that they can attach it to this omnibus spending bill in the first place, based upon what they said, um, is is allowing them to take the money to build gender medicine infrastructure, and then
Mhm.
they will be safe law wise, especially with what you just brought up. If this legal thing stands, right,
Mhm.
it's just going to continue. So what they are desperately trying to save the money for this infrastructure right now, and they're doing that by making everyone think that they're actually protecting kids, even though there's no enforcement at all, other than, oh, we'll withhold the money. But the money's not going to the procedures. The money is going to the infrastructure that's
Infrastructure.
going to house the procedures.
Mhm. Yeah. No, it's all very bad. I also should update you that I reached out to the governor's office again today. I will read to you actually what I sent as a question, and I don't think they're going to respond. I wish they would.
They won't.
I also left a message for the press secretary, but I have very little hope that she's going to respond, um, because now this is what I sent, and I think no one has really looked at it this way except you and I have talked about this. But this occurred to me last night that this is a setup. This is a
Yeah.
bad setup especially for going into an election year. So I wrote to her, and this is the questions I have for the governor. I said, there is no enforcement mechanism in the new language that the House and Senate added to the bill. While it says that the hospital can't do the gender experiments with puberty blockers and receive funds, there is no one watching them except them. They aren't going to tell on themselves. So how would anyone in the legislature know that they were doing these treatments? How does the governor suggest enforcing this language? Also, he could call a special session just to ban the gender experiments on children right now because he has that power. That would solve the issue because there would be a criminal or civil penalties codified in the law. If he doesn't, and the House is forced to wait to vote on a statewide ban until January, he could be out of office by then. He's polling behind his challenger, and the Democrats will have had all that time to mount an opposition to it. Why wait? Why settle for restrictions with no teeth when he can either write an executive order banning the practice or call a special session and pass the statewide ban now? Why does the governor think kicking the can down the road to January and allowing this to become an election issue would be beneficial to Republicans? Republican voters want him to stop this medical malpractice right now. If he does that, it will be an excellent campaign platform of a successful attack against far left ideology. But if he waits, he's allowing Democrats to turn it into a smear campaign, running ads about the anti-trans Republicans and raising money to defeat this looming ban that hasn't happened yet. If he gets it passed now and the people of Oklahoma cheer, which they will because huge numbers of voters support these bans, he's a Republican hero. Why wait? Would you please ask him those questions? You think he'll answer any of them?
No, they won't. And this goes into the issue when I had my interview yesterday with Representative West, who was out touting this supposed fix for this. He explicitly mentioned that he had spoken with his colleagues and they didn't want to put an enforcement mechanism in civil or criminal, but especially civil because of the fact that you could sue the University of Oklahoma. That's what this is. He said civil. They don't want to have to. Again, they don't want to have to use the money that they're being given by the Biden administration right now
to defend
a lawsuit and against that might come up for that.
Lawsuits are coming if they do pass any kind of bill. Clearly, looking at Arkansas, lawsuits are coming. If they pass a bill banning this, they're going to have to fight it in court. So it would be very beneficial to them to get lawyers on the phone right now when they're crafting this legislation and make sure that they overcome whatever these lawsuits are gonna claim. And I don't see how this is possible for the legislature to not be allowed to ban a medical procedure in their state that is clearly harming children. We have evidence that it is harming children.
Hold on just one second. Where was this federal ruling?
The Eighth Circuit.
Which is out of where?
Well, I know it covers Arkansas. Geez, we should find out. Okay, let's see.
Because if it doesn't cover Oklahoma, it doesn't affect Oklahoma.
Well, the precedent will.
The precedent might, but you still have to litigate it in the circuit that Oklahoma sits in. That's the problem.
True. But I mean, they will be sued. I mean, there's no doubt that they're going to be sued. Okay, Eighth Circuit Courts covers Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota.
Right. So it doesn't affect Oklahoma. It does in precedent. But again, a precedent of a different court, all that means.
Yeah, it'll be a different court. And they absolutely, these things are going to have to be fought out in court. Look at what happens when you ban, for instance, South Dakota, I think it was, banned, what was it, the boys and girls sports. And of course, the lawsuits from the ACLU come immediately. It will have to be defended. So if any of them are worried about money being used on lawsuits, let me tell you something. It's coming.
But listen, they're worried about individuals suing specifically the University of Oklahoma because a law is passed that says that there could be civil or criminal penalty. And this is about protecting the University of Oklahoma because that is the funnel for all of the money for this infrastructure. In June of 2021, they passed the Board of Regents passed a measure that unified all OU Health under one system. And so what happens at that point is if they pass a law that gives a civil penalty, the University of Oklahoma is on the hook, not just the hospital. Does that make sense? Because it's a health authority. And that is also unified to the state itself. So it puts the state in danger. That's what I'm saying, is that because of what OU has done, I feel like they backed the state into a corner of saying, since we unified this, it would put you on the hook if you put a civil penalty against it by making it illegal and somebody sued for it. You know what I mean? Because the civil penalty we would be talking about would be in conjunction with a criminal penalty against doctors. So it's because the doctors would work for the OU health complex, and they would be covered by not just their own insurance, but insurance directly connected to the hospital. This is something to ask Ricada about, because this web of liability is what they've created with this, that automatically pushes everything right back up to the legislative branch of the state of Oklahoma. But here's the other part of it. Not just Oklahoma has this wide swath of what they call it's public policy, but it's a swamp, just like an administrative state that's much bigger than you would think it should be in a red state. And so they pass a law, and these administrative bodies has enormous power beyond the legislature to actually do the things that are happening here. And the legislators just go, well, we passed the right law. They just, aren't doing it right. And it puts those agencies in danger, and they're the one running the show, is what I feel like.
So what's the solution?
Well, the solution is for them to pass the law, and regardless, because that's the right thing to do. And if they then have to suffer a civil penalty because of what they have allowed to systemically be created between the people and the legislature, then they need to untangle that. And they can do that retroactively before it gets to a federal court, before it gets to a state court. Right?
Seems to me like there is far too much cozy relationship between the university and the legislature in the first place.
Right.
They should not be so tightly intertwined.
Right.
And I am not understanding why the university hospital and all of these university things get so much funding from the state. Do they not charge money for their university?
They just raise tuition for.
So they're getting tons of tuition, right, through all of that. How does the hospital charges money? It's not a free hospital, right?
No.
So they're a for-profit hospital. Why are they connected to the state? Why does the state have to fund them? I don't understand it.
Here is the thing. This was done by 9 people on the OU Board of Regents. And the state regents for higher ed, okay? The state regents for higher ed is supposedly the direct administrative governing body of that. But so the legislature, just like Representative West or even Nathan Dahm and Shane, there's that buffer for them that, well, if they don't do anything, I can't do anything. Bull! It's absolute crap. But these 9 mostly nameless, faceless people that nobody knows passed this measure through the OU Board of Regents that unified this entire system under a state-funded university. That's what I've been telling people.
Did that go through the legislature?
No.
Or how is it possible that a board that's not connected to government can just simply declare themselves a state-funded organization?
Well, they were already state-funded. What they did, this is the trick. What they did is they took OU's they took a private funded or basically a private industry, which was OU Children's. It used to be Oklahoma Children's, right? So and they made it and worked out a deal it's a public-private partnership. And they said, we're gonna absorb you.
Absorb it, yeah.
Right. And now you have state funding and private funding, just like, guess what? A university does. That is what a university is. It is a public-private partnership. And so when they absorbed it, right, either the Oklahoma legislature ignored it, if they do have power, or they kicked it off to the state higher ed regents, that administrative body, or a combination of both. But there's so much money now, because let me tell you something else about the University of Oklahoma. Since Joe Haraz took over in 2018, 2019, they have massive massive donors from anonymous donors. I mean, the last one I really looked at was $85 million from an anonymous donor, right? And something I covered on my show the other night was what they call this. I might even just pull this up because this is something to talk about. This is called the Strategic Vertical Institutes. This shows everything actually. So I'm going to pull this up because this is ESG, by the way. This is ESG in chief. Let me share this. Hold on. And it really outlines everything and shows you exactly how and why they're doing this and how it's connected to critical theory. Okay. So let me, I'm only working on one screen here. So, okay. So look at this. So this is what OU Strategic Vertical Institutes. It's Pillar 5 of Lead On University Strategic Plan contemplates the creation of university-wide multi-campus, multidisciplinary centers of excellence or institutes. Okay. And these are 4 vertical areas. I don't want to read every little bitty piece of it, but I want you to get the idea of what's happening. Thinkonomics, which I'm looking into Thinkonomics right now. That's it's a strategic framework and a consulting firm that helped with this that has many woke ties. Okay. But they have 4 institutes here. And this one, okay, is called.
Oh, here we go. Environmental and energy, of course.
Yeah, this is literally ESG. Okay. And it outlines it perfectly. Okay. So the Institute for Resilient Environmental and Energy Systems, right? And it talks about net zero, right? Which the governor, according to the Blaze, signed on to, right? To create inclusive and collaborate and convergent research ecosystems that leverage the strength of OU's research faculty and our public and private sector partners, right? So it's talking about using the university as the glue to create public-private partnerships, which make them massively or make them very ungovernable in many ways.
Obviously.
Right, because you can't, they won't touch the university, right?
No.
And look, it says observing and protecting Earth systems, transforming energy and infrastructure systems, just like I said, medical.
Transforming infrastructure,
right?
Yep.
Now and then co-generating community resilience and environmental justice. Okay, so that's IRES, right? Look at this. Here's the S in ESG. And look at this right here. I just want to point this out.
Society transformation. That's a scary term.
Look at ICAST. This is them creating a caste system. And it's so funny that they just put it right there. ICAST. But the Institute for Community and Society Transformation, ICAST, is guided by a vision to transform societies by setting the national standard for convergent, community-engaged research and creative activity. ICAST addresses grand challenges facing communities and society today in the realms of, here we go, advancing equity and opportunity. So that's DEI, that's critical race theory, particularly
in the areas of health
and education.
Yeah, so they're going to start meting out healthcare based on the equity. So diversity and equity.
Right,
so
diversity,
white
equity,
people, white people get in the back.
But also keep in mind that the Roy G. Biv, what did they say? That they're collaborating with schools. Right? They're collaborating with schools, right?
Yep.
And here's the next part. Understanding and addressing social and ethical challenges associated with technological advances and how they are integrated into workplace, schools, and daily life. Okay?
Oklahoma is so screwed.
And look, and partnering with native nations to strengthen cultural continuance and sovereignty. Now listen, the McGirt ruling made from the Supreme Court made the tribes in this state basically a separate sovereign nation within the state. They are not subject to their to laws, to many statutes, to many enforcement policies. So they operate as a sovereign country within the state, like even more so than before. They can be taxed. Many differences there. Okay. But yes, so that's ICAST, but I also want to bring you down, and I'll get to that one here in a minute. Integrative Life Sciences Institute. Global challenges that affect human health and well-being are rooted in a complex, ever-evolving web of socio-demographic, which is wealth and identity, and biospheric systems. So biospheric meaning your gender, your your metabolic makeup. Like it's a strange word, but building on existing strengths across
Well, they
three.
use these words on purpose. They
Yeah.
make everything so complex that it sounds really good, but you don't really know what it says.
Now look,
That's purposeful.
eliminating health disparities.
How on earth can you eliminate
You
health
can't.
disparities? That is
Yeah.
such a ridiculous goal. There's no possibility you could. What is a health disparity anyway? Can you define the terms? They
No, no.
never define their
Here's what a health.
terms.
This is, well, I can define it for you. What they mean by it, when they say health disparities, they mean just like they are talking about with wealth or power.
Yeah.
It's critical theory. It's a difference in outcomes between disparate identity groups as they define identity groups. So they're constantly bifurcating identity groups. At first it was race, now it's gender. Right now, they're bifurcating the binary into, like you had mentioned, we had talked about yesterday with the Z's, M's, Zers, right, into an infinite number of identity groups, right?
Yes.
And so you can, if you have an infinite number of identity groups, you can always find a disparity, which means this is what they call sustainability. It never ends, right? And here's the other part. Here's the last part: transforming therapeutics and diagnoses, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they use the word transforming all the way through this document, all the way through, and then they predicting, preventing, and responding to emergent pathogenic threats.
Yeah. COVID part 2.
Yes, or 3 or 8 or 9. But here's the
Yeah.
other part that's unique to the University of Oklahoma. 3 of the OU Board of Regents, 3 of them, serve, okay, on the same board for the Acorn Aerospace Engineer and Defense. One is the president, and one is Frank Keating, and another one is directly related to education. Okay, and they are partnering with the Department of Defense as a part of this 4-tiered, 4-pillared institute. And so, and all of this has to do with education, because this institute now is planting a satellite in Norman Public Schools to feed the institute at the college. So it's a school choice school, basically, that they are putting within the Norman Public Schools to feed this Aerospace and Innovation Institute. So it's all very connected, and they do it through a public-private partnership, which is almost ungovernable.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost ungovernable.
Right, because they become so enmeshed with the representatives that they're never going to vote against them. The
Right.
money is just changing, going back and forth, going back and forth.
Right. And they can't hold themselves accountable because, again, if you sue a university, the state has liability because it's funded through tax dollars. So that's, and so it gives the legislature an incentive not to pass statutes that you can have a civil liability for. Right. And I think they may have learned their lesson, so to speak, with Arkansas. That might be part of this, you know.
This seems insane. This seems like it is not unwindable, Mark. How on earth does this come undone?
That is a great question. I'm going to be talking to James Lindsay about that tonight, 6:30 Central, because and make no mistake, I truly believe there. Who all has been, and I know this seems tangential, but give me a second. It is my show today, but
Yeah, sure.
yeah, no, but I think this goes to your question. I always feel like I talk too much, so
I don't think you talk too much. I'm learning things. Go ahead.
Well, especially when I have great guests like you, who know so much as well. But Gays Against Groomers, Libs of TikTok, many of these people who are doing awesome work that have been banned from Twitter, right, have had their bans restored, right? And maybe they have really good lawyers. I don't know, or maybe they know things that James doesn't. But James was hitting this at a point that attacked this structure. And there's part of me that just believes that the Twitter sphere, right, is, will remove people permanently, and some people permanently and some people not, as long as they don't see them as a threat.
Nobody knows why.
You know what I mean?
There is no rhyme or reason to it. You
Right.
cannot figure it
doesn't
out.
make any sense. And so James, I would encourage everybody to keep following him on Truth, keep watching New Discourses, because he hits at so much of what Megan's question just was, okay, which was, how do we untangle this, right?
And I guarantee you this must be happening in other states.
No, it's happening in Idaho right now.
Uh-huh.
It's happening in red states. That's the thing. And it's
Jeez.
done through the universities. That's what I've been saying since 2020 was universities are these castles of this ESG, CRT, gender theory, woke economic model.
Why would Republicans partner with these universities that they know are behind pushing the horrific woke ideologies? They know this.
But
Why would you partner with these people?
I think what happened, I think part of what happened was that they signed on to it early. And then when people like me and James and other people started bringing it to them, they realized, wait a minute, holy crap, we're already in deep. And there's so many of their business interests attached to this ideology now that by the time maybe they figured it out, those of you who didn't know, they would pay a big personal monetary price for going against it in many different ways, and even in just being attacked. I think that's a lot of what the call out culture was. Anybody who went against this kind of narrative was ripped down out of public life, right? And we fought back some of that, but this is the danger. And this money right now, Biden allocated this money, this $1.8 billion, Oklahoma. If they take this pill, I think this is they're using any form of manipulation they can to protect this thing. And if they take this pill, it's going to be close to done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because even the Senate came out. Greg Treats state Senate and said
It's like a
this is
payoff.
transformational for Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like a payoff to me. It seems like shut your mouth and let us do what we want to do, and here's billions of dollars to, soften the blow. It is almost like Republicans give up. They give up completely. They give up on it's like they have just completely given up. They hate the bad press. They hate being called mean names. And it's much easier for them to just play along, be the uniparty, do what the Democrats want them to do, pretend to have these majorities, but they're not really in charge.
No.
They're not really in charge. Who is Kevin or Greg McCourtney really working for? Like,
Right.
who really is his boss? I don't think it's the people of Oklahoma.
Who's Greg Treat working for? You know what I mean?
Who are they working for? I mean,
who's
it's
Speaker McCall working for, right?
how can these Republicans who know darn well that the wokest crap in America right now is coming from universities? We've known this for years. This is not new news. This is absolutely, we've known it for decades. And yet they can, with a straight face, tell the people of their states that it's a good idea to partner with these universities and basically make them a pseudo government of their own. It's a pseudo government is what it is. It's a false, they have now this false power where they're getting government funds to continue pushing out the woke crap. And the Republicans just go along with this. They must be getting paid big time. They must be getting very good kickbacks for this, because this is a total violation of everything that they say they believe in, and it's a violation of the people who voted for them. This is terrible. This is not okay. But I got to tell you, Mark, I don't see it. I don't see this turning around. I don't know how you unwind all this. I don't know how you fix this. This is like an octopus when you look at it. The tentacles are everywhere, and Republicans have always been asleep at the wheel. They go back to sleep the second they think they have a win. And Democrats and the left, they never sleep. They never sleep, and they will quietly invade institutions and eat them from the inside out until there's nothing left. And when you wake up and figure it out, it's too late.
Well, I'll tell you, one way that we can put a stop to this is to put a stop to this bill.
The money,
because it's all the money, and they're fighting to protect this money. That's why, I mean, I've held on to this for a little while, this story that Megan has so graciously helped push out into the ether and done so much great work on with calling and holding these people's feet to the fire. But I did it because I learned a few years ago that the right information at the wrong time is not effective, right? And so I brought this out. I've had the Roy G. Biv. I've been watching this institute for a while, and this is the time we have. And they're winning a narrative war at the moment of saying, well, if we pass this little stopgap that's really based around infrastructure for this, that won't stop the procedures, them passing this little stopgap and then passing this money will enable these procedures to happen in perpetuity into generations. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. And so
Yeah.
this is our Waterloo.
But do you
folks.
think
This
there's
is our
any
Battle of the
chance?
Bulge.
Do you think that there's any chance that they will actually turn the money down for good? Like, can you turn the money down from the feds? Can you say, no, we do not want this money, go away, don't give it back?
Yes, you
I,
can.
can
But
they?
now, will they? That's a different question. They can. Yeah, of course they can. But
But
again,
they absolutely will not. They absolutely will not do that.
well, and that's why the people, I think if the people, we need top down, bottom up, right? So the people have got to keep calling, like Megan's been calling. They got to record it. But we also need help from people like the Daily Wire. We need people from the Blaze. We need people that are much bigger than us. You know, Jack Posobiec, anybody that could actually look into Oklahoma right now and shed some light on this, because this is the battlefield. This right here is the battlefield, and you're being flanked from behind. You all focused on Boston.
That
Chris
always
Rufo, I love
happens.
Chris Rufo, but he's focused on Boston right now, and those are obvious. But Massachusetts is gone, folks. It's been gone for 40 years. You know what I mean? Oklahoma is just now experiencing what California experienced 30 years ago, and that's the hard part here, guys. I really wish that we could get their attention and say, hey, throw some heat down here. Because if they did, they could really stop this. They could really stop it. And that's the frustrating part. And I've been trying to say that for a couple of years, you know, but it is a tangled web. James Lindsay came here twice, tried to tell him, and I've tried to tell him, and here we are.
And then what they do is, you know, when you try and tell them, you cannot take this money, here's what's happening. If you take this money, it's over. The narrative is so well set up against that, because they will just turn around, like that Randallson guy said, and say it's all for mental health. And how could you turn down mental health money for children? And Randallson, do you know much about him? Because I saw his quote in the press and I about fell over. He says if there were more money available, he would give it straight to the transgender community so they can continue their transitioning. And he's a Republican. He wants to give public money for private elective surgeries. Is he out of his mind?
No, he's a Democrat. Like he's the definition of crypto woke controlled opposition.
Good God. Why do people vote for people like this? You've got to do better. The people of Oklahoma have got to do better vetting their candidates.
You want to know how? There's actually more pernicious spot to this. What happens in Oklahoma, and you see this elsewhere too, but especially here in Oklahoma, if you have an incumbent that, say, I'm just going to call them the regime once in power, right? And you think they're in danger, you'll pick your opposition and throw them out there and make them look nuts. And if they start to gain traction, you'll see 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 people jump into the race, right? Literally. I mean, we've had from local elections to the governor election, where you'll have for the last national senator election, you had like 10 people jump into that race, all of whom, you know, split the vote to the point that the one person they wanted won because they had the establishment unification behind them. That's what happens. And I can point to race after race after race where the Republican AJ Fuente, remember him? From the OKGOP, that wing of the party, you know, will get behind people and then throw out crazy candidates that will just split all the rest of the vote against.
That's so typical.
Yeah, it's insane. It just shows you that this is the battleground, folks. And I really, really wish, and it's like we're running out of time.
Yeah. Okay. So about running out of time.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a trend where the only Republican governors willing to stand up to this stuff, there are very few. There's Youngkin in Virginia. There's DeSantis in Florida. Sometimes Greg Abbott in Texas. Sometimes, and that's about it. That's it. We have red states, but they're not really red, and the governors have no balls at all.
Yeah.
or they're complicit in it. I don't know. But talking about running out of time, um, I'm not very optimistic that this can be turned around. I got to tell you, I'm not. So the question becomes, what happens when does the whole thing just have to fall apart? Like, I sometimes think it's going to take crumbling to get back to where to
What's going to
get the
crumble about
pendulum.
this, though? What's going to crumble? Nothing about this is going to crumble.
How can we continue to support it? As
Well,
far
we
as
can't support it. That's the thing. That's the fighting back, right? But it's the we're still on the tail end of it actually being unified, and it's all money right now. And I know this there are going to be other
like the federal government keeps printing billions of dollars to
right,
hand out in these ARPA funds, right?
right.
They're just they're going to bankrupt the system. We can't
Yeah,
we can't continue doing this
but that's how.
forever.
Let's look
Inflation
at
is
history.
through the roof. I can barely afford groceries. My grocery bill has doubled. Gas prices are insane. How are people surviving like this? It cannot go on for much longer. It just can't, because it will collapse. There's
No, but they
no
want the collapse. That's the thing.
oh,
Because just look at history. The last global reset, okay, was in World War II, and they did that because you know, half the world was destroyed, right? And so you reset the entire world economy, and if you can't do that, you look at what's going on in Ukraine and Russia right now. Be very worried about that. But
mhm.
but if you want to subjugate a population, what do? You make them dependent upon you. And how do you make them dependent upon you?
Bankrupt them.
Right. That's what you do. And everything Biden has done has been to that end. And the just like he said the other day, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Look at, and Jordan Peterson says this all the time. You want to figure out who is responsible for what and why. Go to the end result and work yourself backwards, right? Follow who's benefiting, and then follow the money. And all of these connections, when you have the Blaze calling out the Republican governor of Oklahoma for signing on to the 2030 energy agenda that's put out by the World Economic Forum.
Yeah.
You've got a problem.
You have a problem. We have a big problem. But it's not like this problem just cropped up. Like, Republicans have been like this for a really long time. And nobody, we've got the whole cocktail party wing of that I think is just still in control. I mean, they are completely, anybody who is against globalism, anybody who considers themselves nationalist, anyone who wants America First policies, they have completely, go ahead, they've completely demonized. They've completely demonized these people and marginalized them. I think personally that wing of the party is winning. There are very few that are doing any of the fighting. I don't know. I don't see it going our way. I don't see it turning around. This could just be the natural cycle of that freedom goes through, the cycle from freedom to tyranny. We could just be ending the cycle, and there's nothing we can do about it. Sometimes I think, let it burn. I don't know what else to do.
But that's the thing. It's not burning. What they're doing is creating something else. And so letting it burn or just, give up. Like what's going to happen is we're going to burn. they're going to be, but I now have our guest of the hour, BillBoard Chris. Thank you so much for coming to the Unwelcome Podcast. How are you, brother?
I'm doing well. Yesterday was a big day.
Yeah. So give us an update. We were just talking about how everything is hopeless.
Sorry. Welcome to the depression stream.
Yeah. And I know that you can give us some hope, because I think you've been doing a lot of big things in a lot of much bluer states, or at least in the outward retrospect, to fight back on this. So give us an update. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I get around. There's always hope, guys. Come on.
Thank you.
Most people still have their brains. It's all good. We're gonna get there.
Just none of them in office, elected to make laws and stuff. They don't appear to have their brains.
Right, but we have to. It's our job to talk some sense into these people and get them aware. But so yesterday I was in Washington State. I had a call in the morning with the Independent Women's Network, which is this fantastic organization doing stuff all around the country. They helped set up this library event that I had spoken at the week before in Rhode Island, which attracted close to 300 counter protesters.
Okay.
Because we were going to speak about issues concerning children's health, and apparently that's something we are not supposed to be allowed to talk about.
Oh, yeah?
But yeah, so anyway, had a talk with them. Then I met with a politician. His name is Jim Walsh, and he's going to be bringing a bill to at least increase the age where children in Washington state need parental consent because in Washington state right now, any 13-year-old can get puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, double mastectomies without their parents' knowledge or consent. They can even use their parents' private health insurance, and the parent will get the bill with the procedure and drug redacted. So I'm just trying to...
Everybody listen to this.
Yeah.
I just want to make one point for my Oklahoma audience. What Chris just said that he's dealing with in Washington state is where we are going now.
Yep.
And if we pass this $1.8 billion in what's gender medicine infrastructure, that's what this bill is basically. Gender medicine infrastructure in 5-10 years, maybe even shorter. This is where we're going to be.
Worse.
This is where we're going to be. Go ahead, Chris. So
yeah, I'll say that again for people. This is what activists are trying to bring to every state and every country. Kids as young as 13 do not need parental consent or even knowledge before they can get a double mastectomy, puberty blocking drugs, cross-sex hormones, but the parent will still get the bill.
Yep.
But they won't know what the bill's for.
Oh God, how is that even possible to be financially responsible for these kids and financially responsible for all the medical bills? And you're the one who has to pay for it, both financially and emotionally, all of it. And yet they're the ones telling your kids, putting them on these drugs. It's insane.
And this is what they mean when they say collaboration with schools too. I just want to point that out because how is a kid getting this information to do it in the first place?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys read the news about CHOP, which is so suitably named, the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I mean, it's the natural acronym, I guess, but
yeah,
just like ouch in Oklahoma.
We have emails from them going to school coordinators for the entire region where they wanted to arrange to bring people in from the hospital to talk about gender affirming care, which is the euphemism for transitioning your child to the opposite sex and making them a lifelong medical patient. So they're actively trying to create a pipeline from schools. I'll tweet out that email in a little while. But yeah, it's totally nuts, man. The previous week was crazy. I was in Washington, D.C. I did a podcast with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and then I met with, earlier in the day, I'd met with 5 members of Congress as part of the Protect Kids Caucus, which is another event that the Independent Women's Network helps us set up. So a number of us spoke there. I met with someone from Virginia who's running for Senate there. He could be a very important person, actually, because he's in an important county, and I think he's going to win it for sure.
Okay. What's his name?
I'm not going to say right now.
Oh, okay.
No,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think he wants it. I'll go.
I see. He's not there yet. Okay, gotcha.
We're getting there.
Yeah.
Had a couple events in Pennsylvania, then headed up to Boston for the Boston Children's Hospital protest, and about 200 Antifa numbskulls came out for that, chanting "All cops are bastards" and "Nazi scum off our streets." These are the people defending the Children's Hospital. It's the same ones that are burning down buildings 2 years ago as part of the Black Lives Matter riots. These are the only people that the Boston Children's Hospital can get to defend them. Right?
Yeah.
What does that tell you when the people are chanting "all cops are bastards" about what side of history you're on? So anyway, those cops were great. They were amazing. There was probably 50 of them there to keep all of us safe, but especially me, because all these people wanted to get at me. And they even created a nice exit strategy where they all blocked off the road and kept these guys from getting to the parking lot I was in. So super big thank you to the Boston Police. Next day was Cranston in Rhode Island. Again, the entire police force had come out. We had about 300 counter protesters there. And then I had a speaking event there. And then the next day I went to Brown University, followed by Harvard University. And then yesterday I was also at the University of Washington. So yeah, I'm getting around.
So are you doing all this by yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a one-man army. It's incredible. He's incredible.
And this is what I'm saying. This is why I wanted to have you on, because you are an inspiration. You have 2 daughters, right? As you have 2 daughters, or yeah. And I'm about ready to have a daughter, and I was like, where are the rest of the dads? That's what I'm saying. I want to create, we can call them the BillBoard Chris Army. I don't care, but we need more dads out here doing what you're doing, because I think there's been this huge push to remove men from
Yes.
the conversation. And I think there's a reason for that. And you're proving the reason for it.
Yeah,
Because
it's so effective.
nobody will defend their daughters like their dads will defend their daughters. And that's just, I haven't even met mine yet. And I'm going, oh man, you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about, where it's just, you get this fire, they're coming after little girls.
I think it's also that, and I don't mean to sound like a crazed feminist or anything, but it's been proven that women's voices annoy people. Like too many women speaking about some people just tune it out, especially men.
Yeah.
Men are used to tuning out women. It's just period. When men, it's true. All right, look, I get
I
it.
don't know,
It's
Megan.
true.
I'm
It's
just gonna
true.
take the fifth
You
here.
You don't
have
get
to
to have an
comment.
opinion on this.
Yeah.
You
There's
can
no comment here.
disavow that if you want. I
Yeah.
don't want to get you in trouble with anybody.
She's
but
making a statement.
but I do think even at these board meetings too, when a father gets up to speak, it just has more weight than 5 mothers who get up to speak. And I feel the same way about the school board issues. We need more fathers. We need more men, because men are I'm sorry, people will hate me for saying it, but men are our natural leaders, and people take them more seriously. And we just need you. We need you out there so badly. And I'm not afraid to say it. I'm not afraid to say that we
Right.
need more fathers in
Well,
this game.
and
Well,
what I've learned
yeah.
in this process is that they demonize what would be most effective against them. You know what I mean? And I think
Mhm.
having some righteous masculinity in this conversation, BillBoard Chris has proved, just as one man walking around doing what he's doing, that is effective. And so that's what I'm calling on here in Oklahoma, with some dads, fathers defending daughters, whatever we call them. I don't care. I want to bring BillBoard Chris down here, and let's all get our boards on and go out and actually show him some backup, in these areas, because he shouldn't be doing this alone, Dad.
I wish I had the money to travel. Unfortunately, my grocery bill takes it all up. If I did, I would be out there with him. If I had the money to travel, I would be doing it. I would be standing out there, although I'd be terrified of Antifa. I don't like Antifa at all.
And since you
very
mentioned it,
true.
please like and subscribe to the channel. I am accepting super chats. I am accepting super thanks and all of those things, but also donate to BillBoard Chris, because he's a one-man army here. Okay. And we're going to want to bring him to Oklahoma, especially if this bill passes, because I know we're going to have problems at Texas Children's. I know that we're going to have problems there. And so that brings me to my next question here, Chris. What can we do? What is your advice to us dads here in Red State, Oklahoma, where we're just seeing this, pop up? What can we do? What advice do you have?
Well, people ask me this all the time, and I never have a set answer, because everyone's different. We all have different skill sets and passions and abilities, and we're not all meant to do public speaking, but whatever someone has a skill for. Just one sec, I gotta turn off my phone. Oh, give me 1 second, okay, guys? I'm just gonna put myself on mute. I gotta take this. Sorry.
Okay, see, he's a very important person, and but he's because he's doing
so hard.
He's doing the work that the rest of us dads should be doing, and I will just say that I believe that Megan has a point. I will not say she is right, because that will make me evil. But that is my whole premise.
Look, it's reality.
You have Moms for Liberty, which that is an invaluable organization.
Yeah, they're great.
They're doing amazing work.
And I don't mean to say women shouldn't be out there doing it too.
No,
you should. But we also need men too.
Right. And I think we're eliminating a whole portion, right, of the population that I know are against this, that I know that can make a difference in this. Because also what I've noticed, especially in a state like Oklahoma, is what Megan's talking about, but on a different level, a different wavelength, that politicians listen to men, a little bit differently too. So yes, go ahead.
Oh no, you can't hear us. You might have to remove and come back in. Sometimes sometimes that fixes it. Although he can't hear me, so it's no good
Yeah.
for me to tell him that.
Hold on. I'll type it in here. Remove.
I wonder
and,
how his sound got cut off. That's weird.
it might be because he's using his Bluetooth and he
Oh,
got it cut off.
maybe it got cut off.
Bluetooth.
Yeah, perhaps.
Bluetooth. Can't spell. Because of phone. There we go. Maybe he'll see that. I don't know. But seeing, I want to get back to the point of also what is happening in Washington. Okay,
He's
back.
back.
Great.
Okay, good.
Okay. I was just making the point that again that what's happening in Washington, what you're fighting against there, what you're fighting in Boston, is where we're headed in Oklahoma. But if you do have advice, we sure could use it.
I mean, everyone's got different gifts, but honestly, we still are at the awareness stage of this. People don't understand what's going on enough, and I think they're starting to get a basic understanding. But whatever you can do to create awareness, especially with these elected officials, if they're willing to meet with you, they need to understand that this is a winning message. They cannot lose on it. These Republicans cannot lose. They will not lose a single Republican vote. All they'll do is pick up the moderates. And they just need to understand how to message on this, because we don't need to exaggerate. We don't need to use salacious or spectacular wording to get attention on this. We just need to tell the truth, the basic truth with compassion, and exaggerating what's going on is never helpful. The left just feed on that. And so it's important just to get your facts straight. So know them yourselves. But
why would you need to exaggerate it? That's the thing.
Yeah. Like I don't use the word mutilation much. Like once in a blue moon. But I find that this is just my personal preference. I think it's insensitive to the people who've been through this to constantly be reminded that they've been mutilated. I don't know. It's one of those words. It's pretty heavy, so I just don't use it much, and I don't think it's super helpful in media and stuff like that.
What language do you recommend? Maimed?
Well, we're sterilizing kids. We're maiming kids.
I like chemical castration because it's technically very, very accurate, and I think that it's not a word that is insulting. It's just simply what it is. It is what it is. It's chemical castration. It's sterilization. And these are life-changing surgeries that are not reversible. I think we can easily categorize them in that way.
Yeah, well, the puberty blockers are chemical castration drugs, and then there's the cross-sex hormones, and then there's the surgeries. And yes, I mean, technically this is mutilating these kids. But I think when it's in the headlines all the time, mutilation, I think you're going to get a certain percentage of the population tuning out because it's just too heavy a little bit.
I sometimes wonder if they've ever looked at the pictures. Have you ever?
Well, no, let me hit that point, because that's one thing I've noticed in Oklahoma. Okay, when I first brought this out 2 weeks ago, right, and I said, this hospital is doing this. I had a kind of a trickle. Like, it was like, oh, this is horrible. There were a few people that understood, but the deluge of people that started calling 2 weeks ago, even before Megan got involved and really ramped up that process, right? The deluge happened when I showed them what this was. Right. And so many people said to me, I did not know what this entailed. And it's jarring, but I think in a place like Oklahoma, which prides itself on its propriety, right? You have to shake them out a little bit. You know what I mean? And I understand, constantly using maybe the word mutilation might make people uncomfortable. But in order to get people to act, especially in a nice, quiet place like this, you have to make them a little uncomfortable. And nothing has done that like the pictures. Because once they see that, they go, oh, no. And I've turned people who were hardcore the other way. They become a moderate, right?
I've shown these pictures before of these young women who've, they're proudly posing for these pictures, and they've had their breasts cut off, and there's these huge just gashes across their entire chest. Sometimes they don't even have their nipples left. And that's certainly one way of reaching people, and it works to a certain degree. But we also have to be sensitive to I think the detransitioners that have gone through this, and I think
Yeah.
also
Absolutely.
when you show the graphic stuff, you're going to pick up a certain audience right away, but you're also going to be turning off a lot who are just staying quiet about this. So there's different strokes for different folks, and
Yes.
it's just good to mix it up a bit. But
Well, and
This is why I
I
think Chris is so good at this, because he has such a calm approach to all of this. And, he's so reasonable and so quiet in a way. That quiet strength is just really very attractive to people. And I think there's just not a better person to spread that message, Chris. You're just doing a great job. I also today on my live stream, I had showed a video of a detransitioner who her name is her last name is Watson. She goes by I Am Watson on Twitter.
Sinead.
And Sinead. She's so amazing, because the way that she puts it and the way that she talks about it is, look, we understand that some people do feel better and relieved after they've gone through this therapy. The problem is there are many of us who feel worse, and we were never offered a different therapy. We were never offered alternative therapy. There is no alternative therapy. It's all affirm down the road of medicalization. And this cannot continue, because there are people like her and like others who needed talk therapy. They needed to discover what was wrong going on in their mind, and they were never offered it. And that's a real crime also, that these children are being subjected to irreversible things without first going down the road of, let's try to get therapy for these body dysmorphia issues
Well,
first.
and as Courage as a Habit has talked about, the therapy's going the opposite direction. That's where ASCA is pernicious in this, and that's where school counselors are pernicious in this. Is that they're pushing kids towards that being the only fix for their problems. And if you do that at a young age, you will affect them for the rest of their lives, right? You will affect them for their mode of thought for the rest of their lives on this, and then that will transition. No pun intended, but that will transition into them hurting themselves in many ways. I want to point this out as well. The longest, most detailed, peer-reviewed study on this was completed in 2003. It was a 30-year long longitudinal study that showed that people who medically transition, first of all, don't experience any relief from their gender dysmorphia in many ways, but they are also 40% more likely to commit suicide. And this is the authoritative study on this, and nobody on the left likes to talk about it, but you can look it up. It was out of Sweden, and they controlled for so many different areas.
Yeah. So the Swedish study showed that 10 years after transition, people were 19 times more likely to commit suicide. So the actual suicide rate was 19 times higher than their peers. There's all these, studies about suicidality, which is different, of course, than actual suicides. And it's not true that there's this epidemic of kids committing suicide, which is the number one thing that people on the left always say is the reason that we need to let kids transition, because if we don't, they'll kill themselves. And this is a despicable manipulation. It is a coercive tactic used when they have no actual argument, because there's no science to support any of this.
Yeah.
But
I've got to drop out, you guys. My editor is
yeah.
trying to get a hold of me, so I've got to run. You guys have a great rest of your show. See ya.
Okay.
Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks, Megan. Yeah. Well, and I will take this because Chris is so effective. I think he's giving us advice that we need to listen to, and I think there's time for shock value. And I'll bring up this question right here from Sinbad 333. And he's saying, when privately talking with reps involved, is using the word mutilation okay? What do you think?
I mean, sure. I don't want to make a huge deal out of the word.
Yeah.
I mean, it's technically mutilation, but when it comes to public relations and reaching the broad audience, it's not. I mean, mix up your words at least.
Yes. Yeah.
Because using that all the time, it's like this sensational word, but it causes a certain percentage of the population to just shut down.
Yeah.
And they want to stop listening to what you're saying, because some people are going to attribute this to just being a right-wing talking point.
Right.
Or something.
Right. And that's the danger here the left does, is that they will, and this is a great note. I mean, for me specifically, and I'll just say that, because having experienced what I've done here in the last 2 weeks in Oklahoma, because it's like a renaissance of awakening, right? They just didn't think it was happening. They didn't think it was a problem.
Right.
that became that I think that was effective at the beginning of getting people's attention, right? But
Yeah.
now a shift into saying, okay, this is what it is, but it's the other words that you used, just maiming or
Maiming.
you
I
know,
mean, the thing is, it's not so much the words, right? It's the
mhm,
tone, it's the way you come at it. It's about having compassion for what's going on instead of trying to make it a sensational thing and um, just being all blustery and going on the attack. I mean, that's not going to reach everyone.
yeah,
Yesterday, I was at the University of Washington, and this young woman came up and she was combative at first, not too bad, but a bit combative, like many of them are. And by the end of this conversation, she had conceded that gender doesn't really exist. And she said that she'd had gender dysphoria much of her life. But then in the next breath, she conceded that gender doesn't even exist. So, how can you have gender dysphoria if you're acknowledging that gender doesn't exist? This is just
yeah,
being uncomfortable with your body.
right,
But just because I'm not starting off the conversation by saying, we're mutilating kids, that would
mhm.
cause her to shut down immediately.
That's true.
And they're not going to want to talk.
That's
But
true.
I just listen and I'm just calm and I use, just basic language that's not too emotionally laden.
Right.
And
Well, and
they
I think
don't see you as this shock jock that's trying to just, get likes or whatever on Twitter, but they see you
that's
as
true.
someone who's interested in having a more somber, serious conversation about it. And this is a very serious subject. So
Yes.
I think it's just important to come at it, depends where you are, who you're talking to and all that sort of stuff. But it's good to come at this from the appropriate level of somberness,
Right. And as in all things, context is king, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's who you're talking to, but this is a very good word. And it's actually when I first came upon this stuff and really started getting more involved, that was my whole mode of thinking too, is that we miss the dads that are buttoned up, because this is the other thing. Chris looks the part as well. And I know this, I don't want to make this all about, but it is about the way you present yourself. That is true.
Yeah.
And having the ability to have some passion when needed, but also being able to control that passion and put it into a unified message is why Chris is so effective. And we can all take lessons, myself included, from that, because there are times where I get very upset, especially when I see politicians who kind of paint this off, and it's like, oh, well, it's not. That's a lot what you get in Oklahoma, which is like, oh, it's not that bad, right? Then you might need to be a little bit more passionate. But on the
It's
whole,
bad.
yeah,
It's bad. So, yeah, I mean, they can clearly see I'm passionate when I'm in the middle of a university by myself wearing signs looking ridiculous.
yeah,
But you're right. I'm not out there wearing a white beater and jogging pants, at least. So
right,
I've got a bit of professionalism going for me there. And honestly, I don't get disrespect too much for looking ridiculous like I do in a sandwich board. I get disrespect for the message, but
mm-hmm.
again, these people are deceived,
Mm-hmm.
and there's too much. Like, this is a war. This is a war for our kids, but we have to be able to reach people from all over the political spectrum, and we have 90% of people on the street in agreement already, Democrats and Republicans. But there's so much division in our society that we have to be able to have a message that can reach people on both sides of the political aisle, because the way some people's brains are wired is, if you come at this from the wrong angle, they're just going to tune you out right away. And we need to reach them. Now, the only statistic that truly matters for me is the number of people who receive some truth each day. And it doesn't matter where they are on the political spectrum, because eventually the more people who learn, the more they talk, and this will bleed across party lines. Because right now, this is, of course, being pushed by the Democratic Party, even though all the voters aren't in support of it. But this has been a long answer for your original question, which is, what can people do?
Yeah.
People can have conversations. They just got to start talking about this. They need to get up to speed. They need to get informed. They can go to their school board meetings. That's probably the number one thing they should do, because these are all recorded, and we get these viral moments where you get these school board officials saying foolish things. But you just got to get brave, and you got to talk to whoever you can within your circle of influence.
Right. Well, and I think BillBoard Chris I'm just gonna call you Chris, but
Yeah.
first of all, go visit his website. It's right there. I had somebody ask about that. Yes, go visit his website. He's got great information. He's got a place to donate and do that. But the presence at he's an example of the bottom up that we need, becoming kind of the top down, because he's developed a platform. But you've been doing this for how many years without much
Just over
notice at the
2.
beginning? Right.
Just over 2. Well, at the beginning, I had to stay in Canada because we weren't allowed to come into the United
Yeah.
States.
Mhm.
And I've done everything I can do in Canada. Honestly, if I've done all the things I've done in Canada and the things that happened to me as well, if this had happened in the States, I'd probably have 1 million followers by now.
Yeah.
But, getting attacked and getting my arm broken and getting arrested and all that sort of stuff, all the conservative media in the US would have loved that. But of
Yeah.
course, it didn't get covered because it's Canada. And no one in Canada covers it either because all our media are left-wing propagandists. The media are so responsible for this
Mhm.
entire thing. It's
Yes.
disgusting. If they
Mhm.
simply told the truth, I think we mentioned this the other day on your podcast. If they simply
Mhm.
told the truth, this would be over.
Yeah, it's
So
true.
there's this expression that politics is downstream from culture. And I
Mhm.
think that's mostly true. It's not always true. Sometimes politicians can lead, but it's pretty rare.
Yeah.
But we need to make it safer for these politicians to be able to introduce these bills. And we need to make it safer for some of the sensible people within the American Academy of Pediatrics, for example, to put pressure on their leadership. Because as long as this cancel culture still exists, and it is abating, but as long as it still exists, people are afraid to speak, including
Yeah.
politicians. And a lot of
Yeah.
these conservative politicians have bought some of the language of the left without even realizing it. So never use the language of the left. Don't call it gender affirming care. Or if you
Yes.
do, make sure you point out that this is a euphemism for chemically castrating children, giving them the wrong sex hormones, and doing surgeries on kids.
Yeah.
Because that's what it means. This isn't helping a child to be who they really are. That's the language of the left. And that's
That's
why
right.
this has had success, because this is all a sales pitch. And as you get older, you discover that the world is just full of salesmen. Everything
right.
is sales.
Yep.
And this is just sales. And the young generation, not really knowing how the world works yet, especially young women who tend to have a harder time with puberty and tend to have more
Mhm.
compassion and empathy, it's preying on that characteristic of these young women, and it's making them into the foot soldiers of this movement, pushing it in schools and as counselors and everything.
Yes.
So we're not going to reach the people who are really pushing this unless we learn how to talk with them. And right now, I think there's a big divide there going on.
Yeah. Well, and your demeanor and your message on this has been so effective. But I want to talk for a moment about your experience in Canada, because I don't think a lot of people, including myself, know a lot about that. And I think it's very effective for people in Oklahoma and us red states, or even just America in general, to understand that you can look to a place like Canada and see where you're going. So you started doing this a couple of years ago, and you said you've had very bad circumstances. Can you just explain to us what happened to you in Canada, and
I mean,
where this might be going if we don't do something about it now when we have the chance?
yeah. So I'm always positive. I've always known from before I set my foot out the door the first time I went out that we're going to win this battle. There's no doubt about it. It's just too crazy to last. But yeah, so when I first started going out on the street, the first thing I had done actually was I put up a proper billboard, a big billboard that said, "I love J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter author." So I was following the lead of Posey Parker in England, who had put up a poster at the Edinburgh train station that said the same thing. She'd put up this poster. It said, "I love J.K. Rowling," because J.K., of course, the Harry Potter author, has spoken out about the attack on women's rights and also this child abuse going on, which is my main focus. And this poster at the train station lasted one day because some people on Twitter complained that it was hate speech to love the world's greatest children's author. So they took it
Yeah.
down. And it pissed me off, to be honest. I mean, a lot of things about this culture today are very worrisome. We've got communism rebranded as equity.
Yeah,
being
that's true.
coming into our society everywhere. So all
Mhm.
through our schools and corporations and everything. So there's a lot that worries me about what's going on with our culture. And I'm 46, almost 47. I only care about the life I leave for my daughters. That's my whole objective in life. That's my job as a dad. And I'm not going to let this stuff take over our society without a fight. But anyway, I got tired of our speech being erased, because that's another problem with society, more so in Canada. And so I put up a big billboard that said I love J.K. Rowling as well. I happened to be reading Harry Potter at the time with my little one every night at bedtime. But I put up this big billboard, and it got paint bombed overnight. And then a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech. And she freaked out on Twitter, and she put pressure on the sign company, and they covered it up the next day. So it lasted one day. I'd signed a contract for 3 months with an option to extend it indefinitely. And I was going to extend it indefinitely. I didn't care how much it cost me, because for me, my whole objective is to start conversations. That's the entire purpose of what I'm doing from the very beginning, is we should be able to have a conversation about anything.
Yes.
But this word trans strikes fear in the hearts of grown men, and they can't even say the word because it's one of these verboten items that we're not allowed to talk about. And I reject that wholeheartedly, especially because we're hurting kids. We need to be able to talk about this, and mostly girls. And I have girls. So anyway, I did that billboard. It got taken down. I leveraged all the outrage online. Right away, actually, a woman in Silicon Valley reached out, an executive there, and she sent a couple $1,000, and I raised some more money that night. And a week later, I had a billboard up in San Francisco. And then all throughout Utah, Portland, Los Angeles, all throughout the metro in Washington, D.C., and then Times Square. So those were all billboards. There was like 40 of them in total, and screens inside the metro that said, I love J.K. Rowling. And then that was all September of 2020. And I couldn't put up a sign in Canada because none of the sign companies in the cities will work with me, because that's the state of things up here. So I said, okay, well, if I can't put up my billboard, then I'll just become a billboard. And I did. And I had these signs made that said, gender ideology does not belong in schools, and I love J.K. Rowling. Those were the first two. And gender ideology does not belong in schools. Why that one? Because that is the head of the snake. If we don't get this crap out of schools, you're going to graduate 2 million kids every year who are true believers in this cult. And that's exactly what's happening. And then they become the recruiters. They become the ones pushing it. And this cycle now never ends. And you end up with a society that believes it's totally fine to just change the sex of children.
Right. Well, and that's part of the issue here of what I've been talking about DEI. Going back to what you said about using their language. You know, when you use their language, whether it's equity or even inclusion in that context, you adopt that, it becomes they're landmines. Even if you try to reappropriate them, they become landmines, right? And that, but what DEI does is it is the unification of the membrane that unifies this ideology between public and private institutions, right? And it's become a hack of the separation of church and state in America, because you have the government and companies pushing this moral ideology, of which, in the name of inclusion, gender affirming care or gender the surgeries and these procedures, right, are a main doctrine of that. It's a main way of living it out into the public. And just if you're a Christian or not, you can take lessons from go into all the world and preach the gospel, right? That's what they're doing with kids, except they're using the state apparatuses and now the private apparatuses as a combined unit to push this mostly through the media too. And then going back to what BillBoard Chris was saying about the media, and I'm trying to get people to understand that not all of us can affect the national media, but we can all affect our local media. And I'm finding that it's much worse at the local level in America than people realize. It's much more pernicious. It's much more undercover. They use all the language that Chris is talking about. And I think something so simple as to what Chris is doing, I want to spread across the country. That's what I want. I want men to get out there. Yeah.
It's so easy. I go to university yesterday, University of Washington. I might talk to 10 people. How many conversations start? It goes all through the campus. They all see this guy and they all start talking. That guy's here again.
Yeah.
Right? But now I've been there a number of times, probably 3 or 4 different times, and a couple days for a few of those trips. And a bunch of them know that I'm not this evil boogeyman that I was originally presented as.
Yeah.
And so that starts to spread as well. And the hate I get isn't quite as strong. People are nicer to me there than they are in other places when I first show up. But it works. And you can go to Harvard, you can go to these Yale universities, you can go to Brown, you can go to wherever. I've gone to USC, I went to the University of Texas in Austin, I went to UC Berkeley, I've been to UPenn. And you're just one person with a couple signs with words on them that nobody dares to speak in this society.
Yeah.
And it shocks a lot of these people, and it gets 1,000 conversations started on campus. And it's these university campuses where these conversations need to be had the most of anywhere.
Well,
it's these young women who are becoming teachers when they graduate who are pushing this. It's at universities where women's studies have all become gender studies.
Yes.
And it's relatively easy to push back in a pretty big way just by being peaceful and standing there and watching those ripples spread outwards. But you asked what had happened to me in Canada. I mean, most of it's honestly, I get more than 90% support wherever I go.
Yeah.
But of course, the violent people are violent, and I've been assaulted more than 20 times. I've been arrested twice after getting assaulted. Police deemed it easier just to get rid of me. I was banned from walking on streets in the center of Vancouver for 6 months until
Really?
court. Yeah, they charged me with causing a disturbance for being present.
For being
Just
present
for being
and alive.
And getting circled by Antifa. There was this big event downtown, like 1,500 people there. So I just go to wherever the people are. And so I walked over to these police and they said I was instigating. I said, what? I've been here 15 seconds. I haven't even talked to anybody. I don't approach people. They all saw me and circled me, and they said I was instigating. So a second time I walked off the sidewalk into this public square, and a guy came and knocked my phone out of my hand. That's happened like 10 times because I was filming it all. Police all staring from 20 feet away said they didn't see a thing. There was like 20 police there. And so I argued with them for a couple minutes and said, are you telling me I can't go into this public square just because I'm wearing signs that say I love J.K. Rowling and gender ideologies not belonging in schools? And the police officer, one of them said, I'm not saying anything. And this other guy said, this is a safe space. And I was naive at the time, okay? Because I'm just a normie from the suburbs.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that was code for safe for them, not safe for me.
That's right.
So anyway, I'm a stubborn old mule and I know my rights. And so I walked off the sidewalk a third time. I walked about 20 feet into this public square. These people started circling me. A guy came and hit me with both of his fists and forearms, kind of like that. And instantly I was grabbed from behind, handcuffed, taken to jail, charged with causing a disturbance and banned from walking on all these streets in the center of Vancouver.
Ladies and gentlemen, inclusion. That's inclusion. Yeah.
Communism.
Yes.
This is, they call themselves anti-fascists. These are pure fascists, pure and simple. But then a couple months later, I got sucker punched from behind. I stopped that guy from running away, gave him a single push to stop him from running away, waited for police to come, and they arrested me. But they released me. But then 2-3 months later, I got a phone call and they were looking at charging me again with assault causing bodily harm for a single push that I gave a guy who'd punched me from behind. And so I decided then and there, I'm never touching anyone again.
Yeah.
Because it's too risky for me.
Well, but that's the Martin Luther King model, right? I mean, they had, that's what, and I think because especially for a group of people who define words as violence, right? I mean, and you don't accept that premise, obviously, because there's a difference here. I would categorize what doctors are doing to kids as violence. That's real violence. But when you are dealing with a group of people that will use that against you, right? Undertaking what Martin Luther King, literally trained people to do, which is to sit there and turn the other cheek. Because the minute you drop to their level, you lose, right? It's set up against you that way. And so,
I mean, I don't want to be scrapping in the streets. That's not what I'm out there to do.
Right.
But I was getting so much abuse in the beginning, few months, just constant verbal abuse, physical abuse. And this guy sucker punched me from behind and it stunned me for 6 or 7 seconds. And when I kind of snapped to it, he was standing at the crosswalk like nothing had happened. And these 2 young guys pointed him out to me. So I went to get his picture and he started to run. And we're allowed to do citizens arrests in Canada. And I was just tired of it all. And so I caught him. I literally chased after him with my sign connected, blowing behind me like a cape. And I didn't want to trip him, but I gave him a push into this wall to break his momentum from running away. And it worked, and he fell down after hitting the wall. And so I walked away to de-escalate. I did everything right. But anyway, then police were looking at charging me. And I don't want to get some criminal record for these losers. So I had vowed, I need to be like Gandhi out there. You cited Martin Luther King. Yeah.
Who got it from Gandhi.
Yeah. Being like Gandhi.
Yeah.
And Jesus before that was the teaching, I guess.
Yes.
But, and by the way, I'm not a Christian. I'm just saying.
Yes.
But so I vowed I'm never touching anyone again. And then what do you know? A week later, after this phone call from VPD, Vancouver Police, I was in Montreal, and I got jumped on the street by 5 or 6 people, and they ripped my signs off. I got instantly punched in the face. I didn't even know they were coming. Took a big shot to the back of the head. One guy stomped on my body cam in the middle of the street. A few of them fled in a car, I think, right away, and 3 of them remained. And this guy picked up a traffic cone, which he swung 4 times at my head, trying to cave my face in. And the base on those things is pretty thick. But I just kept blocking it with my forearm every time. And I think on the second blow, you can hear a little click in the video because I was filming with my other hand, with my phone now. You can hear it snap a little. But yeah, I got a broken forearm there. And then a guy came and squirted me with mustard. And then they just casually walked off laughing about it.
Yeah.
So,
and nothing, of course, happened to them. And that's the repressive. That's the repressive tolerance of it all, as James Lindsay used to talk about. And but I want to end on a positive note, and I want to be respectful of your time. But because all of those things have led you to being a very effective and a much needed voice in our society about this issue from the standpoint of a father, because that's, like you said, like, you're doing this. And I think you are the model for all of us who are dads that want to get into this fight, especially when there are voices out there that explicitly want to remove us. So I really appreciate what you're doing, because you've been an inspiration to me, and you've been an inspiration to lots of dads out there. And although I can get hot on this program, sometimes that there's a time for that, but there's also, I think, when you go into public, especially when you go before a school board meeting, you are going to catch more flies with honey than you do with crap, and you are the prime example of that. And so I'm going to work on making sure that the guys I'm going to be working with here in Oklahoma follow that lead. And I hope we can bring you here soon, because I think we're going to need you down here to shine some light on what's happening in the reddest state in the country, because there are other red states, as you've seen, Idaho, and that are having this issue as well. But
sure,
if you had,
I'll try to, I'll make a trip. I like to go wherever people, if I'm getting support and you're giving me support right now, you're just giving me moral support.
Yeah.
All you got to do is ask, and I'll come.
Yeah.
I can't come right away, but I'll come.
Yeah.
And I've got some connections now that I've made, so I should be able to hook up some meetings with some politicians there as well.
That would be great. And I think it would be very effective.
Yeah.
But if you have a parting piece of advice,
we'll advertise it, and we'll get all the the lefty protesters coming out, because they really do our job for us.
Yeah.
If I'd gone to Boston Children's Hospital and they'd all ignored me, no one would have written a thing. But we got 200 violent counter protesters. And
I think it'd be nice to have you
about it, and reached millions. So
I think it would be nice to have you on the university campus here, because that's where this is centered. So
I go to football games. I go to hockey games here. You got to go to wherever the people are. There's no sense going somewhere if there's no foot traffic. So a great thing to do, people, get some signs made, go stand outside your college football game. You're going to get nothing by support, by the way, at a college football game. Like nothing but support. Or NFL too. And it'll give you like this sense of purpose and a sense of accomplishment.
And some strength to go into the, and then some strength to go into the areas where you might not necessarily have that kind of support, so. Well, Chris, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to come here. Everybody go to BillBoardChris.com, support what he's doing. We will see him in Oklahoma soon. And if there's one thing I could say, follow his lead, because he's doing this the right way. So thank you, Chris. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. See you later.